thank you to, you may have noticed, David Jung, Tony and Melanie Singh are with us. And so thank you for being here, guys, and for your support from the CFC. David's going to help facilitate some of the Q&A session in a little bit. Before we get too far into it, I just want to acknowledge that this situation sucks. Petty and Virag tendered their resignation on Sunday, and it's troubling, right? It's troubling for all of us. Jesus' disciples had a similar troubling moment, and after Jesus predicted his death, his betrayal and Peter's denial, in John chapter 14, we can see what Jesus' response to his disciples were when they were confused and troubled and just, in a tough situation. So I thought we could just look at that. It's in John chapter 14 in verses 1 to 4. So Jesus replied to comfort his disciples. He says, "Do not let your hearts be troubled. Trust in God. Trust also in me. In my Father's house are many rooms. If it were not so, I would have told you. I am going there to prepare a place for you. And if I go and prepare a place for you, I will come back and take you to be with me, that you also may be where I am. You know the way to the place where I am going." First thing he says is, "Do not let your hearts be troubled," which is sometimes easier said than done when we're in a troubling situation. And I think he gives us a little bit of a clue of how to do that. Trust in God. Trust in God's goodness, in his power, in his faithfulness to us as his disciples. Trust also in Jesus. And here's an important thing, I think, for us to think about. Petty and Virag, they didn't lead the church. The leadership team, they don't lead the church. The board doesn't lead the church. Jesus leads the church. We're kind of along for the ride. And obviously, people play a big role, but it's important perspective, especially in times of uncertainty. And then he talks about heaven. He talks about his Father's house and many rooms, and how he's preparing a place for us. And I think it's important to consider that, to remove our focus off the trouble of the here and now, and to think about what's in store, what's in store for the future. What is on earth isn't the goal. It's the room that is stored up for us in heaven when we get to be with God. And it reminds me of that song, this world is not my home, I'm just a passing through. My treasures are laid up somewhere beyond the blue. And I know I need to remind myself sometimes of that fact when things are uncertain and when they're difficult, which is a time like now. So with that perspective in mind, let's get into it. So as I said, on Sunday, Petty and Virag, they tendered their resignation, which is a admittedly difficult situation here. They are on the call, and they can answer some specific questions in a little bit, but let me run through what I think are going to be some common questions at this time. So number one that might be coming to your mind is, what do the Zabads need right now? And so Petty and I had some exchange on this. Number one, prayers. You don't come to this realization lightly, and just ask for you to keep them in your prayers, and guidance and strength during this time. And number two would be a bit of space just for this week as they continue to process the emotions connected with this transition. That'd be helpful, just for a week, not like for months and months, but just give them a bit of space here while they work through some of the feelings here. What is the timing? Their exact departure date isn't known right now. They've essentially given us a working notice while they look for another position. It's a bit different than the Rollins when they left. They had an accepted offer and a fixed timeline. In this case, there's a little more unknown. If I'm going to venture a guess, I'm going to say a few months, but that's just an estimate. It kind of depends on what they find in visa situations and all of that. But a few months would be a pretty good estimate. What happens in the meantime? Good question. So we've had some discussion on this to kind of figure out, and as they shared on Sunday, they want to help out any way they can to make the transition smooth as possible, which is much appreciated. So number one, They're going to continue to lead the campus ministry. Joe and Cami will step in, and they're going to kind of help with the transition for after they depart. Petty will continue to do the Ephesians series that we just started. We need to work out some details on the exact calendar and all of that, but that can come a little bit later. Vireg's going to continue to be involved with the women's retreat. I know they had a planning meeting yesterday. Petty will run midweeks over the next few midweeks. We do those on the first Wednesday of the month, so maybe get a few of those in. They'll be still be involved with preteen Sunday classes. I think those are once per month, so that'll continue. Of course, they'll stay involved in current Bible studies and restoration studies, and then they'll just make sure to pull in some other people just for continuity's sake in case they continue on. Petty will still remain involved with the singles leadership as he has been, and I'll try to tag in on that to help with the transition as well. And they're going to stay involved in their shepherding relationships. No reason to change that. Obviously, there'll be a lot of communication as their search progresses, but so it'll be a developing situation, depending on how that goes. You might be wondering about financial support for them. So the board met yesterday and agreed to kind of a fixed period of support until the end of July. And then, depending on where we're at in that situation, we can cross that bridge later on. The main thing is, the board wants to make sure that they feel supported and taken care of. And so we'll do right by that. So that's where that's at for right now. There will be a send-off in the future. We'll have some party of some kind, but it's too early to figure that out just yet. Next question might be, what are we doing for hiring going forward? And as far as the hiring of a new minister or couple, we haven't got to that phase yet. A lot to figure out before we get to that. But I would say that I would prepare mentally for a period without a full-time couple. And it's something that we've experienced before, and we should probably just be prepared to face that again. Fortunately, our congregation is blessed with a lot of talented people. So bank on your shoulder being tapped in some way. So that'll likely happen. That was kind of the stuff I could think of at the beginning. We'll get into the regular Q&A session here. And so I'll turn it over to David to facilitate this portion in a sec. As you're aware, David and Erica have been in a discipling relationship with the Zabads for the past 2.5 years. So I think that would be great to have his involvement here. Just to keep order here and not have like a free-for-all of questions, what I figured we could do is, if you can raise your hand using the, I think there's a raise hand button, then we'll, maybe what we can do is call out a name and then unmute, and we'll go through that to try to select people. You can probably put stuff in the chat as well. We'll try to get through all of those. If you don't get your question answered or you're not comfortable asking in a group setting, then feel free to email either the leadership team or the board, and we'll do our best to get back to you. Which raises another question: who are those people? Okay, so the leadership team, you got the Golans, the Tans, the Anyegas, Jody and myself, and Liz. And then on the board, Scott Grant, Sean St. Jean, Jen Anyega, Javier, and Daniel. And so hopefully you've got the email of one of those individuals. And if we need to, we can forward those on. So with that, I am going to stop talking and we'll open it up, and I'll just look for, the hand button to go up, and then David, you're unmuted. We can see how this goes.
Well, thank you so much, Mike, for all the hard work that you put into this, and as well as the leadership team. Maybe just we'll do this because I think if we start off with a statement of just a few thoughts that probably can answer some of your questions already. And then maybe we'll do some ground rules as well, what questions are, because Some questions are not as helpful in a group like this. That's a one-on-one situation. And some things are a little more about the system that can be answered easily, but not here. For example, if you want to know board structure and stuff like that, you can find that out from the board. That's not something that we're going to do here, looking up org charts and things like that. That doesn't make sense for this meeting. In many ways, we'll set up some parameters so we don't stay here longer than we need to, for sure. But thank you so much, Mike, and also the leadership team for all the hard work. By way of introduction, Tony, Melanie, and myself and my wife, all across Canada, and Petty and Virag were involved in this process. At the formation of the Canadian Family of Churches, we were elected to be chairs of we were co-chairs of the Canadian Family of Churches. And so our families of churches are divided into different regional families, and we represent those regional families. And so part of our goals is to be able to help churches, get a little bit outside perspective and help. And so that does involve sometimes a little bit of experience and expertise. It does involve some discipling and guidance support. And so these things we do without compensation. It's a volunteer position, and it is elected position, and there's rotating amounts. And whether you know about that or not, what we're saying is that myself, Tony, and Melanie, and Erica, Erica's not here because she's trying to finish her PhD, as some of you know from the sermon that I preached. But we're here to support the Vancouver Church, this transition. We're here to support Petty and Virag, and we're here to be able to just, be able to help you get some of the bigger questions answered. And of course, if there are any tricky or challenging situations that the leadership team of the Vancouver Church needs a little bit of guidance with, then we're also here to offer our experience and some of our expertise. For those who don't know me, I am in the congregation in Winnipeg. Some of you may not know me. So we have a church of about 100 here. I've been here about 24 years with my wife. My wife works in the secular world. She came out of the ministry in 2003. So she really gets what it means to be pressured to work in the world, but also try to fulfill the ministry. Because as you know, when you have a church of 100 and you have lots of needs, and so she fulfills those with an amazing leadership team that we've created here. Also, because of various iterations of me trying to find different ministers, success, I think we've got some people now. But I work also in the secular world, so literally I'm kind of stuck between two jobs. And so I do work for the ICOC because in the Winnipeg church. But right now, it's really stretching me to be able to work in the secular world as well, pretty much full time. And so, yeah, I've got to go to work tomorrow morning, just like you do. I'm not saying the ministers don't do that, but my schedule isn't. It isn't at my beck and call, like somebody is my boss someplace. And so I get the this is a late meeting for us. It's 9:50 for me, and this is when we're starting. Right. And so I'm going to actually pass it over to Tony and Melanie, share a little bit about what space they come from. And for them, it's actually 10:50 when they started it. So they're here. And so it's not like we're on here because we just don't enjoy sleep. So just let you know, last couple of weeks has been kind of crazy for our travel schedules. I came to Vancouver end of February, went to Turkey, went to Toronto, and now I'm back in Vancouver. And now it's just in 5 weeks. So that's been super fun for me while trying to work on jobs. So I really appreciate, Tony and Melanie doing the same thing with all their travel schedule as well. Maybe Tony and Melanie, can you introduce yourselves a little bit too? I know that the church may know you, but just to know you in this space for those who are listening for the future as well.
Sure. I'll do a brief introduction. I am Tony Singh, and I serve in the church in Ottawa, and we've been here for about 4.5 years, and we're excited to be a part of the CFC, which is the Canadian Family of Churches, and we just want to be a resource and a source of encouragement to whatever capacity we can serve in. And, having walked down some roads that has been challenging at times. And one of the things that Melanie and I feel very strongly about is that we really do not believe that when someone, in this case, where it was not a fit for the ministry position, that their value or their credibility or even their ability to serve is somehow thrown out to pasture. and rather they have not become deaf, blind, mute overnight. And I'm talking specifically about the Zabads. And so we just want to be a source of encouragement for the Vancouver Church. Certainly, we work within the context of the Canadian family of churches.
Thank you. And Mel, did you want to share something too?
Not anything in relation to our role or anything like that, but, just want to offer any sort of help or encouragement for any sister who wants to call me or talk to me or ask me questions personally. Happy to be there. I think Tony and I have been through a transition like this, and it's, on a personal note, it's very challenging. But we also spent, several years working jobs, and so I think that some of our personal experiences, we feel very much like we want to help in any way that we can, both to the church and also to the Sabbat. So
thank you so much, Melanie. I just want to reiterate, we love Petty and Virag, and this is a transition. It's not an outing of any sort or a firing of any sort. It looks different. So believe me, it does. And so I'd love for Petty and Virag maybe just to share a little bit, whoever wants to share about, hey, so how did this come to be? And for us to listen with open hearts, because they're on the call too, right? This is not a call without them. So they're part of this process of answering your questions, and mainly to answer the questions so that Satan does not get in the way and start filling your brain with some stuff. And also, to be honest, you have some characters that are not for the church, and they are sources of disunity, and listen to the voices of their darker selves, not their best selves. And so they can truly infect the church with things that are just not true. And so you're hearing it from the horse's mouth, and the horses being Petty and Virag, and they're not here under duress. They're not here under any, there's no gun in the room. You don't threaten people over Zoom. That's not the best way. You kind of show up at the house and wait behind them, if you know what I mean, waiting for them to say the wrong thing. So really, they're free to say what they need to say, and they've shared with many of you without any quote unquote oversight. But I believe they're godly people. There's not a massive issue of beyond being human. I mean, they're sinful just like you and me, but really we love them, and we are very excited of what God will do with them next. But it's just in this situation, I think we've shared and they've shared that this is just not a fit. It is not a fit for them. And we didn't want to wait till any critical mass happened before we realize it. And we don't want to wait till there's a fire before we realize our house isn't that guarded that well. So I'd love for Petty or Virag or both to be able to share some thoughts, like some of the context of this, and perhaps consider maybe some of the questions that you've answered from people. And really, there's nothing up their sleeve, nothing up our sleeve. This is not some conspiracy theory. We're not doing this for our health, that's for sure. We're here to help and to guide and offer some answers. So Penny and Virag, would you be able to share that?
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you. And thank you for thanks for everyone. Thank you for Dave, Tony, Melanie, for all the support. We're very grateful to both the leadership team and the board. And really, we understand that this is a challenging process. It is definitely that for us. But we believe that this is God leading us and guiding us. When we moved here 2.5 years ago, it was in the middle of the pandemic, and I just want to say that part of this is, starting to lead a church in the pandemic was not easy. It was not easy to connect, not easy to build friendships, to really, that was an emotionally hard time for us and for you guys as well. And everybody had their own struggles with that, and it had an impact on this not working out at the end. So I believe that. But I also, we're disappointed, we're sad, because we wanted this to work out so bad, and we love you guys and giving our hearts to this church. And I think the best illustration that I've come up with is when you like a girl and you start dating, and she likes you, and there's mutual attraction, and you start dating, and it's exciting. But then, as you go along, there's some friction, and there's a little bit of conflict, and there's you rub each other the wrong way a little bit here and there, and that keeps going on, and there's still attraction, but there's also that feeling of, is this how we want to continue to go, and are we going to get married here, and you go, okay, maybe maybe we're just not a good fit, and before you start to get into fighting and argue, So anyways, that's an illustration in some ways that probably falls short in describing all of our relationships, because there were some wonderful things and there were some challenges, and it's a mixed bag. And when I look back the last 2.5 years, we want to remember all the good things, but we also want to realize that this is probably not just putting more effort, time, or energy into it might not make this work, because it's just not the right fit. There's a vast cultural difference between where we come from and our culture, whether that's just the Hungarian culture or European culture, or just the church culture that we grew up in, versus the North American and Canadian culture and the Vancouver church culture. And that's been a bigger difference than what we anticipated, honestly. We've also realized through this last 2.5 years some of our own weaknesses and limitations in being able to lead a church with a different culture and with different mindset and with different history. This is really our first time attempting that, and we've learned a lot of things along the way, and we realized some of our limitations and weaknesses along the way. So, and we actually love all of you guys and have a tremendous respect for everybody. It's not that we don't want to be with you, we just don't feel like we're the right fit for the role of lead evangelist and women's ministry leader. And we look forward to being part of this church for the next few months, and very grateful that we get to continue to serve, continuing to work with the campus ministry and some of the other things. And we're very excited about it. We're very excited about the relationships that we have, and look forward to spending some great times with brothers and sisters. And last Friday we went to a great birthday party for Holly's and did some karaoke, and there's lots of great memories that we look forward to making some more as long as God has us here. But here's the conclusion we came to, was that this is better this way for us and for the church as well in the long run. We believe that. So.
Thank you so much, Petty. Would you like to add anything to that, Virag, or did he share what he wanted to share? No? Thumbs up?
We're good.
I can't see you. Okay, great. Fantastic. So I know that he laid out some stuff. Just let that sink in for a little bit, because right now you're probably feeling some emotions, and some questions are going to be broadened by emotions. And so that's fine too. But I think some of the questions will be broken up into different things. You have personal questions. And so I may direct that toward, that's more of a Petty and Virag question. You can do that offline because it's very personal to ask. But there might be things that are for the leadership group that I can direct toward some of the leadership to be able to answer that going forward. But some of the logistic questions, I think that it may not be valuable here, because the leadership is still trying to figure out, because remember, they're all volunteers as well. Do they got it all figured out? No, not yet. But they're trying their best to meet your needs for sure. And so there's some of these little things that I may direct. It's not, I'm trying to be flippant in any way, but is it valuable to answer here? Or is it valuable to answer in another place? And some larger systemic things I won't be able to answer because I'm not in control of that. And so I'm wondering, does anybody have any questions or any comments for anything that's been shared so far? So feel free to raise your hand, and I can direct that or try my best to direct people that can answer that for you. Not everybody all at once now. Yes, Craig. You have to unmute. Thank you.
I think folks might be a little nervous about asking questions now that you've set parameters that might be like, you can't ask any questions at all.
Is that how it came across? I'm sorry if that's what it came across like.
I'm playing, but yeah, I think folks might be wondering, what can I actually ask at this stage in the game?
Sure.
And I do wonder the same thing as well, right? Because obviously, as you have said, not all the information isn't necessary or healthy, or we don't need to know all the information. But I suppose, like, this may be for later, but I am curious to know, like, what do we think we need? You know what I mean? Like what is it that the Vancouver Church may need that the Petty and Birag could not supply? Because we'll have to start the search for someone new, a new couple. And so the thoughts in my mind, okay, what is it that we need? We have unique needs as a church. What is it? I am curious to know what the cultural issues were, if that's appropriate to talk about. If it's not, that's fine. I can talk to Petty personally about that. But I suppose it would be helpful for us to know that, though, as a body, to try and understand our own selves. What cultural idiosyncrasies do we have? Because culture isn't always good. It also may be benign. It may be neither good nor bad. And it may be something very positive. And so I'd be curious to know what, for example, the cultural issues might be that we might need to address as a body, and really consider and say, okay, let's examine ourselves as a church and understand the cultural issues we might need to think about. That's just a part of being a body. Obviously, Petty, if Petty wants to talk about the European thing, not personally, like his personal things, but like, here's what Europe is like on a broad scale, I think that'd be okay, if that's something to address. But I'd be more concerned about our, traits, characteristics that we would need to consider from anybody's point of view who knows what those things might be.
Well, I think I appreciate Craig, what you're saying. Let me address a couple things. I don't think I said, and I wanted to make sure I'm clear on this, that questions were not on the table. What I said, I believe, was that I would direct them to the right places. So I think that's what I said. Is that correct, Craig, what you heard? Because you said something a little different, that, well, it sounds like your parameters shut down all questions. Like, I don't think that's what I said.
I
if
think
that's what you
people
heard,
might feel a little intimidated. It's
Sure.
already intimidating. It's already a fairly intimidating setting with all the people, 60 people, 60 screens,
Sure.
So, but I'm with you. Like, it's a sensitive situation, and I 100% agree that not all things are appropriate. You know what I mean?
Sure.
At the same time, we can ask anything, but we also don't have to answer it. You know what I mean? Like,
for
we
sure.
can determine at that time whether or not it's correct. But I think,
And
these folks
facilitators are meant to be able to guide the meeting in such a way where, because this is kind of a town hall, and we've seen town halls devolve into big mishmashes of emotion. And so part of facilitating is to guide the right information. Of course, there's some things to protect Petty and Virag's integrity as well. So they can ask in the chat and filter it out. They can do that. But I think this is a time where, one, you've agreed to come to this space. So you understand that there's a level of safety and lack of safety here. And if anything you want to do personally, you can do that offline. So we've invited for that. But for sure, you can ask questions in the chat or what you want. But in the end, I think a lot of these questions will be answered by Petty and Virag. And of course, if you wanted to do a systemic analysis of what's happening, I mean, we can talk a little bit about that. But you only can be aware of what you're aware of. And certain levels of conversation is meant for another space, for sure. But I understand that, what you're saying, Craig. So first of all, that's the thing. We don't want to create any unsafe space, but there's a level of understanding when you come to a town hall that people are going to say what they're going to say. And of course, as a moderator, and for those who are providing information, they also have that autonomy to say or not say what they want to say in a group like this. So I wouldn't see it as something that's hidden, something that's an agenda, for sure. So does that make sense to you, Greg? Craig, sorry.
100%.
Okay, great.
100%. Thank you. Thank you for that.
Address that. So let's get back to the question. I think originally saying, hey, so what were some of the specifics of the cultural differences and the nuances? I mean, Petty, did you want to answer some of that?
Sure, I can. I think Vancouver is a really interesting and very unique situation where lots of cultures come together and mix and create a unique culture, including the food, which we all very much love. So I think European culture in one of the main things is there's probably lots of differences, but one of them is European culture, at least for Eastern Europe mainly, is very emotional, sometimes even dramatic, and that way. I think Canadian culture seems to be a lot more reserved and not as emotionally forthcoming, especially in larger settings. So that was one one difference that I realized that I just because people are not sharing their emotions, that doesn't mean they don't have them. And one of the things that I've been learning is to really ask more questions, to create a safe place for people to be able to share emotions, have some one-on-one conversations, to really hear how people feel about. So those are some of the areas that maybe in a European setting that happens more automatically. And sometimes extreme emotions can be scary for people at times as well, when maybe I get that share things like that. So those just that I'm not sure if that answers your question, but that's just one illustration of a cultural difference, and it's not right or wrong. This is one of those that is just different, in my opinion. So let's.
I think Petty answered something of it. Does that clear some things for some folks? Because I think what I heard him say was that it's not European, it's Eastern European. And there's a massive socioeconomic divide there. There was a wall in between that of ideology and how power should be managed, how decisions should be managed. And so there's a different thinking of power. And when you think about Vancouver, right? It's a mishmash of things, but certainly if you were to talk about continuums, it is probably more left of center in Vancouver. Whether you know it or not, it's probably a little more left of center. And people from collective cultures, people from cultures that are more individualistic, unless there's some ability to have cognitive flexibility to be able to change and switch back and forth, especially under stress, if you're not able to do that, it can cause friction for sure. In Vancouver, I mean, just by itself, because Corinth affects the Corinthians, it's more left of the culture, as opposed to you leading in the central part of Canada, because you think Calgarians or more Albertans are very different than Vancouverites. And so it takes a certain level of sensitivity and cultural awareness to be able to map that out. But of course, Vancouver also is a mishmash of collective culture, like the Asians showing up. And so oftentimes it does clash with left culture and right culture or center culture. And so these are all like, if anybody's interested, you can look up Hofstede's cultural dimensions. These are the things that talk about systems and theories and how churches lead. So I'm just saying that sometimes somebody with a certain level of thinking of ideology is not wrong. But I don't think I can lead in certain cultures because I would have a hard time doing it. I just would. And it causes friction over time with leadership, with the regular members, and just the average person, because you're trying so hard. And I think Petty put it in an appropriate way. It's a square peg in a round hole. And that's fine, because there's some places that a square peg would be perfect for it. And I think some of the Eastern European ways, it's hard to undo that all of a sudden. And it does take what we call a cognitive flexibility to be able to do that. And for them is that the best use of their energy? Is that kind of, Petty, what you're kind of, am I feeling your vibe there?
Yeah, fairly well. Thank you.
Appreciate that. So Craig, does that kind of address for other people? Because you're asking about the culture systemic changes needed. It's not about changes. It's about having the right fit. It's having the right fit.
I suppose, I'm assuming then that the Vancouver church has nothing to change. We're good. No growth needed. We just need the right fit.
I didn't say that. I didn't say that.
No. Yeah. Right. So my next question is, what about our local church culture? Like that, what we were talking about was national culture, Canada, versus Eastern European. Fine. And as a foreigner, as somebody who's coming into this country, I also notice the same things. You know, I come from, you know, and it's informed by my own home culture, okay, which is neither right nor wrong, just different. I accept that. What about the local church culture? And it doesn't mean, I'm not saying that it has to be wrong, like, you know, this is what's wrong with Vancouver, but what is unique about our culture that we need to, we need to define. If we can define that, then perhaps we will find a better fit based on understanding our needs. I think that would be important to understand. Like, I don't know. I've been a part of the church for about 2.5 years. I don't think I could say, so firstly, I love the Vancouver church. It's an amazing church, lovely people. But I don't know if I could describe it accurately, you know, because I'm still getting to know it, right? So maybe one of the older Christians who've been in the Vancouver church for a long time, whether on the leadership team or yourself, whoever, could describe it and say, okay, here's the Vancouver church. Here's what it's like. Here's our whatever. I don't know.
Sure. Sure. That's a great question, but probably not for this space, because what you're talking about is an overhaul descriptive nature of an organization that's super complex. And so unless we're leaving the parameters of this meeting is to answer questions about Petty and Virag and why. And so that might be a great discussion for the future, Craig. And I think you'd be great to have people in a group to discuss, okay, what are some of the specific things? Because I do know what Paul said. To the Jew, I became like a Jew. To the Gentile, became like a Gentile. So there were massive differences between that. And so for him, he had the ability to shift being a Pharisee to being like a Gentile. And the goal is to win as many as possible, not just to shift and to adapt. And so I think that unless somebody disagrees, this is a larger systemic conversation. That's not just for Vancouver, but for every church, for sure. And I think that you're right. How do we define that? Well, I think it involves lots and lots of voices. Okay. So I think this answers a big swath of, is this a systemic question we want to talk about? And I think it's a great point. How about that? When we have more conversations about that, okay? So somebody else have something else that's different than this, because we're not going to exploit this any further.
Holly has her hand raised.
Is it okay to ask a question?
Of course.
Yeah. So knowing that, we've had, fairly often turnover with our leaders here in Vancouver. And then thinking about going to your next position, Petty, the North American culture is not a lot different, USA, Canada. What would you tell them that you need from the new group that may be hiring you to support you for success? What would be some of the things you'd say in that interview that would give you more support, both you and Virag?
That's a great question, Holly. We're probably too close to this whole situation right now to have a real clear answer to that. But I try not to evaluate the situation when there's so many emotions. So maybe in a, as we look for a job and get into interviews, we might go through some of the emotions that happen with our resignation and all that, which it's not an easy transition, obviously, but I'll probably be able to answer that better in the future. That's a great question.
Fair enough.
Thanks, Petty. Any other thoughts? Yes, Annette, or whoever's on there.
Yeah, it's me. Again, you can direct me or whatever, say this is appropriate or not. But one thing that my husband and I felt was we were under the impression that the church was doing really well. The campus ministry was growing. The singles ministry was doing better. We were having baptisms. And so we were really shocked to find out that, things were not going as we were under the impression. And somehow I would like to have an answer to this, more clarity. how, like, why were we so off in our impression of the church?
Patty, you want to take that? That's a great question, Annette.
Mhm.
And so what you're saying is that you're seeing it from one point of view, which seems to be going well. Why this sudden change? Like, what did you miss?
Yeah.
Right.
No, I think I agree, Annette. I think that there's some great growth happening in the church. There's a lot of positive things that we see the same thing. There were some other things that were not necessarily as visible or as publicly felt necessarily, but they were still there. And some of these things were more felt by us and less felt by the congregation. And there was a group of people that were very much aware of some of these challenges, but it was not something that the entire I didn't believe that the entire congregation should be known about. And we were all very hopeful that as we're working on this, we're making, it will all work out great. That was all of our intention. So I'm not sure if that answers your question, but I don't think this takes anything away from all the great things that God has been doing in the Vancouver church. And I can't wait to see what he's continuing to do. Even with us not being the lead evangelist and women's ministry leader, God is not hindered by that. And I look forward to seeing more baptisms, more growth, and great things happening, because he's using everyone's faith. It wasn't just Virag and I. We were glad to be able to be catalyst to some of those things, but it's your faith. It's your vision, it's your love for God, and that God gets to use, and you, meaning not just Annette and Rob, but you all. That's what God's working through, and we're just gonna be part of that in a different role for a little bit, and that's God is doing great things, and I can't wait to see what he will do in the future as well. So.
Thank you, Patty. I think we as people see as the world as we are, not as it is. And so you see aspects, this is not a punitive measure. Oh, things were doing terrible. Like in history, it's not about that. They were grinding. I mean, I think they've shared, they were feeling it. They were feeling they were trying their best in various areas of the church. And this is really Patty and Virag's choice. It's their autonomy. They get free choice to do what they want. This is not a gun to the head situation. I hope you don't sense that from them. Nobody's ousting anyone, right? So it isn't sitting around. For them, they sat down, they measured some of the things that were going on, and they say, hey, there's two questions they answered. Is this best for the church? Is this best for us? And they ended with no for both sides. And so what are we going to do with that? I mean, we can ask and ask and ask, and there's other aspects of it, but I think in the end, you got to really see it is Patty and Virag's choice. There's no gun, right? Do you feel any gun? I mean, I think even this whole idea, they wouldn't be on here if it wasn't safe. That doesn't make sense. Most town halls don't involve the people that are in the town hall center of attention, right? And so does that, hopefully that kind of answers it for you. It is not about success or not success, right? I don't know. Was it George or can't be Eddie?
I think DM was first.
Oh, DM? Okay, go ahead, please.
It's EM.
Yeah.
Okay.
Oh,
I
Ed too. Sorry.
Yeah, that's Ed sit next to me. Patty and Virag, I was on the day that you have your letter, I was flying back in the evening, and it was a mixed emotion for sure. I do appreciate the fact that you led the church during COVID time. It was not an easy time. I can see that, and the whole church probably look back and can remember. I really appreciate the voice that you have during the time when we needed the connection the most. And you allow, transitioning time, and every church, I'm sure in the entire world, experience a similar thing where we have different platforms to meet together. But until we meet at the Vancouver place, that's the first time I ever met in Vancouver place, Croatian Center. And I think the legacy, I would say you guys left behind great memories. I appreciate that transitioning time get out of COVID, it was not an easy time. And the unity slowly building in for everyone to get back to the momentum to meet in person, it's not easy. So I want you to know I am grateful for your leadership throughout that transitioning out of COVID, and really help to connect the church, piece the whole thing back together. I am grateful for sure. And I was excited to continue to look for a new building for the church. But that's another legacy you leave too. I will continue to help support that group that looking and hunting for the right place for the church to be. I think that will be an ongoing project, I would say. But overall, is this a mixed feeling? I feel sad. But at the same time, I know our church, our congregation is a mature congregation, have gone through many transitions, and I've seen God's hand, support the church from time to time. For 20 years, I have been here. Regardless of culture, I think the disciples here are faithful, and I think that's something that I know the church will go through transitions and will come out on the other end okay. But I definitely want you to know I appreciate and love you guys. You give your heart when you're here, 100%. I see that.
Thank you, Ian.
Thank you so much. I think George.
Hello, can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Oh, perfect. Yeah, I want to echo with what all the people said. I'm very grateful for the.
I'm sorry, brother. Can you somehow move your face closer to the mic, because it's quite muffled and we want to be able to hear what you say? Well, anybody know what happened?
I think we lost George.
Okay. Well, why don't we just put a pause on that, and then anybody else have any questions until we get George back? I think there's other forces at work. I mean, please feel free. I mean, we can always redirect the question if it's just something that's for Petty. Yeah, please. Or Petty and Vera. Anybody else?
George
We
is
got
back.
George back.
Sorry,
Can't see his forehead.
It's a bad connection on my Bluetooth. Okay, I'm gonna turn off my video because it looks weird. I just want to echo with what DM and with what DM said too. I'm very grateful, Petty, for you leading us during this time. I do have a question in regards to what we're doing good. I want to see what we can still continue on in keeping on the same track towards our goal as during that 30th anniversary that we have. So I was just curious if there's anything that you found great, that we're still doing good, that we can keep on continuing on. And maybe if there's something that we may need to improve on, that's great to hear too. But yeah, feel free to answer it however you want to answer it.
Amen. No, I think this is an amazing church with some amazing people, and I have so much. Vidag and I have so much love and respect for you guys. I think the church has gone through some very challenging times through its history, and the fact that you guys are here and giving your heart and loving God is just, hearing some of your stories and some of the challenges that you endured, and that made us. You guys are, heroes, and I think so. That's just want to really emphasize how much that means. I believe that means a lot to God, the faithfulness, the resiliency, and so that's I think that's excellent. I'm really encouraged to see a lot of gathering in the church, the hospitality, the house churches, the food, just making people welcomed. And that's, I think that I'm seeing that in this church, and I'm like, hey, if we're gonna keep loving the people in this world, they're gonna want to be a part of this. So keep doing that. I'm very encouraged about just people trying to use their gifts to build up the church, and serving and helping. We've seen even just in this last year since COVID, a real resurgence in volunteerism. People, there's more and more people that want to do something and serve, and so keep doing that, because it takes a whole village to build this church. So those are some of the things. I'm sure there's many more, but those are the ones that come to mind that we really appreciate and value and cherish in our hearts, and I'm sure God does the same even more.
Thank you, Petty. Does that answer some of your thoughts? I mean, I think you can get Petty and Vera to answer a little more of that on a personal note for sure. Holly says, how do we ensure a respectful workplace to speak and open, transparent communication, a healthy church culture we need to examine? Yeah, that sounds like a great plan, but probably not for this conversation, right? You're talking about cultural things that probably are a little bit too big for this conversation to address. So these are
actually responding to Kathleen Hammer's comment. So yeah, it wasn't a question for the forum. It's another time.
Oh, okay. Because I saw it as a question. When it says question mark, it says, how do we ensure?
Yeah,
so I just wasn't sure what you meant. But sorry, that makes sense. These are good questions to be asked. But once again, the focus of our time is like, hey, do you have any questions about Petty and Virag's stepping down from their role that impact you and you want to know? Because what it is, we're just trying to counter any voices that you have that there's some kind of thing going on that you don't know about, that it's appropriate for you to know about. And really, it's a time of loss and mourning. I mean, even when somebody's exiting our life, we're going to feel this loss. And of course, we have lots of questions trying to reason and balance it out. And that's part of that for sure. But we're here to say, hey, listen, they're great people. So you've got a great church. Do you need to repent in areas? Just like everybody else. And so there's no smoking gun that sometimes there is, for sure. And so, any other thoughts before we kind of, this is not a one and done conversation. So, Tony, did you, what?
Yeah.
Pardon?
I was going to make a comment as well. I think Tony unmuted as well.
Oh, please, Melanie.
I think there's so many levels of complexity and difficulty with having a discussion like this when it's not even face to face, right? When it's on Zoom, and there are questions and emotions, and I think that there's multiple levels of difficulty with it. But one thing that I will just say is, I think one of the things that Satan loves to do is, when we feel like there's silence on an issue that we might feel, he loves to fill in the blank. And he can often fill in the blank with our own thoughts or our own insecurities, or perhaps fill in the blank by us chatting with somebody else about our feelings. One thing that I would just say, it's best to go to the source. And I think the source would be Petty and Virag, the board, the leadership team. These are the people who you can ask specific questions of. And the second thing that I would say is, as I listen to some of the questions that are being asked, what I so appreciate is you clearly have felt like things were going well. You felt loved. You felt like you were heading in the right direction. And that can sometimes lead to quiet reservations. Like, are there things that we just don't know that are happening? Those are also things that I would go to the right people to ask those questions, right? Quiet reservations are very, very destructive, particularly when we take those quiet reservations to other people who don't know, right? Because that can be dangerous ground. So I just really appreciate the difficulty of this type of a meeting. I particularly appreciate it for the Zabads. I'm not entirely sure I would have had the wherewithal, given their situation, to be able to be in a meeting like this. But I also know that they love God, they love you guys, and they wanted to be and do what was best for you guys. And so that's my only encouragement. Take what you think or you feel, and with respect, try to have some of those questions or reservations that you have answered. And I'm happy to answer the ones that I can. I don't know all of the information. I know some of it, but I know that Tony, Dave, and I are happy to facilitate that in any way we can. So.
Thank you, Melanie. Tony, did you want to share some thoughts?
Sure. It's certainly a challenging time. And one of the things that I think is important is to change the pathology of people who serve in the ministry and what happens afterwards. And we don't have a very good track record of that. And we must change it. It must change on two fronts. One, that we realize that this is not the end of the world. And as a matter of fact, so many good things are going to come. I use this illustration oftentimes. When Jesus was hanging on the cross, so to speak, it looked that the enemy won, but it was God's greatest crowning moment. And I think it's really important that we live by faith in what is happening here. And I think the Vancouver church needs to ask herself some very serious questions. As Petty and Vera need to ask themselves some very serious questions. There are moments in time that we all come to, and we have to ask ourselves, what's happening here? What's going on? One of the things that we did not want to do is to say, oh, we had a meeting for the sake of having a meeting and not address real issues that people have on their hearts. And so I say that to say that this is just the beginning and not the end, to say, well, we had a meeting, let's just continue. And so I think that's a very, very important dynamic. When Melanie and I stopped serving in the ministry in Boston in 2013, for many, it shocked a lot of people. They described us as lifers for the ministry, that this is who you were made to be. I can tell you this, a few years later, I'm living my best life as a ministry person. One of the reasons why is that I took stock of who I am, whose I am, where I'm going, what blind spots do I have, and ultimately leave a lot of it up to God. Because one of the challenges here is that we could really try to seize control. And I can tell you this, control is an illusion. It's an absolute illusion. And I am in Toronto here, visiting someone who suddenly found out they got ALS. And trust me, it rocked their world. They did everything in life to set themselves up not to have these kinds of things happen. And now we have to deal with it. And so that's my 2 cents worth. And I would love to engage anyone, because what I think is important, I appreciate, I think it was Craig who brought it up, but people who are bringing things up, is that we just don't want to have a meeting to say we had a meeting. We want to actually address real issues. And to me, the idea of rolling this out is so that we can then say, okay, well, here, I didn't know what to ask or how I should ask it, but I think I understand it a little bit more now. And so here is my question. Here is a question. And so I'll make two more comments before I leave. One, before I end this, I don't think I could have done what Petty and Virag did in terms of coming in and leading a ministry in the middle of COVID. We had a full year before engaging in that sense. That's just the reality. I think what is of paramount importance that we have a pathology of sending people out to pasture as a mule that has no value when they themselves resign from the ministry. I want to emphasize what Dave says. This was Petty and Virag's decision. We can't then, and then Petty and Virag have to answer some questions themselves when they look in the mirror. So does the Vancouver church. So that we are better for it later on. What a waste it would be to experience some pain, some challenges that is going on, and not have it be a stepping stone and a springboard to who we are going to be and how this is going to form us ultimately. And I can tell you this, the fact that Petty and Virag are here gives me little concern, little, if any at all, for their desire to please God and how God is going to use them. It really does. It speaks volumes to their character and who they are. And so I say that to say, I think this is a moment to pause. I'm not talking like this very moment. I mean, what happened here, and ask ourselves some very penetrating questions. Because every decision we make has ramifications. Some has greater than others. So that's my 2 cents worth. I would love to talk with anyone and share some of my thoughts on these kinds of things and what happens and where do we go from here. Because I really believe if we would let it, this could serve as a springboard to where the Vancouver church is going to be a year from now, 2 years from now, 5 years down the road. So hopefully that makes sense, and hopefully that at least offer some insights and to open up the door and not close the door. And I hope you really hear and feel that, because there is going to be trauma because of this. And we must deal with it, or else it's going to create a pathology in our mind. And we want to end that pathology and create a new and better one. My 2 cents, maybe 3 cents.
Thank you, Tony.
Amen.
So, I mean, is it possible to mourn and feel sorry and sad, but not feel sorry for yourself? Those two things don't have to come together, right? And so I think that's a big deal for sure. Craig, did you have your hands up, or what? You know what I mean?
I did. Thank you, Tony, for that. As someone who was put out to pasture. Side note, history. I do want to say that the fact that it took many of us by surprise is actually a good thing, because it meant that there was discretion and that there was a containment of what issues there were. And so, because initially I was like, hey, what's up? But after this discussion and thinking about it, I appreciate that people weren't running around in the middle of church saying, hey man, we're having issues. Let's talk about it. And, infect everybody. So I think that we can appreciate the fact that being taken by surprise means maybe a good thing. All the issues were contained in the place that they belong, if that makes any sense. Okay, and I hope that makes sense.
It does.
So
Very, very good insight.
So I think that that's something to appreciate. I know how people feel, and that we want to know the information. You know what I mean? Like, we want to know the information, but we can't know all of it. We shouldn't know all of it. But I definitely agree with Tony in that everywhere where it is appropriate, it may be awkward and difficult, but everywhere where it's appropriate and right, we should address it. You know, and I think it may take doing things we have never done before, because, you know, most of us are PTSD from the history of our church and struggle with this scenario. Okay. And I am personally not convinced that we've ever really, as a body, managed to deal with our trauma, our history in any real direct way as an entire body. That's just my opinion, though. And so it's an opportunity to learn how to manage issues like this as a body, not just as individuals, but as an actual body. And so it would be a really great exercise for us. I don't imagine it would be easy, but I imagine that it would be very fruitful and extremely maturing for us. Thanks.
Well, it's really insightful, Craig. Thank you so much for what you've offered today. Great point. You know, I think something maybe you can consider this too. And many of you would not have this perspective. Some of you would. But in what other job where you resign, where the whole place feels horrible about themselves? There's very few jobs. I mean, many of you have changed jobs and they're like, oh, hey, have a good time. High five, maybe get you a cake, something, right? This job, there's a lot of guilt. I've been here 24 years. I'm out December 31st, 2024. And it's like, how does that work? Right? And it's like, can I make a choice? Like, am I able to do that? Because if you trap me because of guilt or something, like Tony talked about a pathology, you know, I think one of the essence of this is Petty and Virag are autonomous beings. God gave them freedom to do with whatever they did. And just because they want to not lead Vancouver doesn't mean you're bad people. Like, I don't see it. Now, in the history of the past, that may have come that way. They're a bad minister, you're bad people, or you're bad church, bad ministers. I mean, whatever that is, as opposed to, you know what, something's not fitting for us here. And we've seen it in various places, and it's whispered by God. I mean, do I want to wait till the screaming by God before that happens? And so they've talked about this, not just with us, with other people, and they've done the things that they needed to do. And they really, without duress, with a free heart, made a decision. That does not mean Vancouver's a bad place or bad people. It does mean you're sinners, but then I just can't figure what church is not, right? Doesn't mean there's things you need to grow in, but I don't think it's directly connected to that. You can think it that way, but it's not the same. And I don't think you can connect all the other ministers' history with all this, because it's everybody's got to have that consideration that they're individuals, and every situation's got to be looked at individually. You can't lump it all into some weird narrative, right? We don't want to do that, because that's why we're having this meeting, so this narrative can be broken, right? And it'll continue to be broken. And so for you, is it okay that Petty and Virag made a choice? Is that okay that they make a choice and we honor that choice? Because if they can't, then what are you saying? They can't do that. They have to. Well, then they owe you something. Well, where would that come from? Like, that doesn't make sense to me. For any other job, that wouldn't be true. Just for this one, it's a calling, it's a job, for sure. They made a choice. They want to do this. And they don't leave with hard feelings. And I don't think you should either. So Penny and Virag, did you want to close off with anything, any other thoughts before we just call it a night? Because I don't see any more questions coming up. Any closing thoughts by Petty and what I just shared, or what other people have shared?
Yeah, so no, thank you. Thanks for everybody, all your questions, your encouragement. It's we've gotten close. Our hearts gotten knitted together. That's why it makes it a harder thing than just, quitting any job. But it is our choice to do this. And I agree. There's, we all have our role and our to grow in this. I look forward to learning. I already see some things. I probably don't see most of it just yet because I'm still in the middle of it. So I'm looking forward to, maybe a few months from now, looking back and going, okay, now some of these things are becoming more and more clear. God is the best discipler, and he does it perfectly. Even the painful parts, the discipline parts, he does it for our benefit and our betterment. So I trust God in this. And I trust that he's going to continue to lead the Vancouver church and teach you guys, what you need to learn, and maybe not through this situation, and that's totally fine. He has his own ways and his own timing, and so there's, so that I have great confidence in God bringing things to our attention. The Holy Spirit convicting each one of us of sin, righteousness, and judgment to come. The Bible talks about all of those things. So that those are very, that gives me a lot of faith that God is not done with any one of us, and he will continue to work in us going forward. So please pray for us, and we'll pray for you guys, and we're gonna spend some good times together here.
Yeah, I would love to say that. Definitely, I never done that before. This kind of thing either. So never ever came to my mind that you are the problem. I don't even know how it came up. And and then I know that's when we don't know things, what is the hidden sin? What is there? What is, I really wanna, please believe us. It's our decision. It's really our decision. And it was a hard decision too. And I think we did a lot of great job, and I think that's why is it hard. Even it's very encouraging that you express that, and it's mean a lot. But as Patty just said, that there are differences, and that's a question that can we continue this good job, or maybe someone else would be better. And when we say it's not a good fit, it's always two sides. But it's not, it doesn't have to be a hidden sin. It just needs to be, okay, next time, well, we would love to do differently. And I really appreciate, oh my goodness, few of you show so much humility that, hey, let's think. And honestly, that's what I can. They're like, where is God middle of the whole thing? And Satan wanna deceive us. Satan wanna divide us. Satan wanna, just put and grow mistrust. But God is there too. And God wanna teach something to me. God wanna teach Patty. God wanna teach you guys too. Everybody, when we go through the hard time, it's always a good part. Even like sickness or whatever, when we go through hard time, there is always something what we can learn through that, something what God revealed. And then maybe we didn't want that hard time, but it is what it is. What could you do? But there is a quote that I would love to see. It's not from the Bible. I love Bible too, but sorry, it's not from the Bible. But it says, sometimes God doesn't change your situation because he's trying to change your heart. And then that one of the things that really helped me, I hope it's not a preaching, but that when David went to fight with Goliath, and then everybody was so tempted to see that, oh, here is the giant, oh my goodness, what's gonna be happen? David came and said, I see that God can do glory. God can do miracle. And I have a temptation like, oh, there is a giant. What is it? That is a big problem. But I think when we see the big problem, there's always a potential to see God's glory. and I am middle of this. It's hard. It's very hard. Sometimes I see God, sometimes I see the problem. But that's my goal, and that's my hope, that through this, and that's my prayer, through this I will become better for God. And then through this we are getting closer to God, all of us. And then we can glorify God together through this. Maybe in a different church, but we would love to come back, eating good Chinese food and all the Asian food, and that we want to hike here. So, hey,
I probably can't finish my bucket list hikes of BC before we leave. So maybe there's need to come back.
So,
Amen.
Yes. And then we look forward to seeing everybody in heaven and spend eternity together, which will be awesome.
Well, thank you so much, Petty and Virag, also just for sharing your heart. And really, I don't think there's any much more to say. And if you have any more things to say, please feel free to reach out to them, reach out to the leadership group, or reach out to us. We're here and available, nothing up our sleeves. And so hopefully it just soothes your heart and kind of doesn't make you feel better, but it soothes you to realize, okay, there's nothing here that's scary. It's just, this is a transition, not a loss only. This is a transition. Okay, so Mike, I'm wondering if you could take us out in a prayer, and then we'll get on, I think, to our next meeting for the house church leaders.
Okay, sounds good. Let's actually, first of all, thanks everybody for the questions, and thanks Petty and Virag for being here, and for David and Tony and Melanie. Really appreciate it. Let's pray. God, thanks for this time that we've had to just talk and continue this conversation. And Father, we just really turn to you and ask you for you to reveal your will to us. Father, we want to submit to your will. We want to follow you. We want to learn. We want to grow. We want to change. We want to glorify you. And please make it clear how we can do that. We want to honor you through this family that you've given us, and we ask for your help to do so. We pray that you bless this kind of transition period while we figure things out. We pray that you bless the Zabads as they figure out their next steps. I mean, I know you've got this figured out, God, but we just pray that you'd make it really clear for us that are sometimes blind to things. And we just ask that you continue to move in a powerful way, as you always do, and as you continue to do. Father, help us see that, help us recognize it, and help us make you proud. It's in your son's name we pray. Amen.
Amen. Thank you, everybody. Thanks, Mike, especially for arranging this. I hope you have a fantastic rest of your week, folks. And thank you for us in Vancouver as well, until you move on to God's next chapter. So I appreciate that.